Hey, Deserving listeners, 90 Day Fiancé, let's watch.
Divorce. It's like hitting me in the face with a bat.
Hello. Hi.
Tiffany, how are you?
Nice to meet you.
Paul.
Ronald, hoe gaat het?
Klaar niet, dank jezelf. In the past, I was against going for counseling with Tiffany, but I want to make sure from my side that I tried everything to fix it.
Oh my goodness. So they're going to couples counseling. But you know what? I usually get really excited, but I'm done being excited. I'm going to get excited when they go to their 5th or 10th session. One session I am not going to get excited about. We've seen Mike and Natalie go to one session. We saw Darcy go to one session. We saw Kalani and Asuelu go to one session, and nothing changed because, as far as I can tell, they never went to future sessions. Therapy is a process. It is not a one-shot deal. So I suspect normally I'd get all excited. Yay! But plus he's saying that he's tried everything, and so, okay, fine, I'll go to couples counseling, which is not a good place to be in right now, and in terms of motivation to work in therapy.
So we decided to go for couples counseling, and I chose to go see my uncle because he is a marriage counselor.
Tiffany, how
All right, well, in my neck of the woods, that would typically be an unethical relationship. You have a dual relationship. You have a family relationship and a client relationship, because, particularly in couples counseling, because for Tiffany, she could perceive him being the therapist being on Ronald's side. Plus, presumably, the two of them will run into their family member at family functions, and therapy is a confidential space where people can speak freely. So, yikes. Now, maybe in South Africa, they have a totally different ethical code around that, or there are no other options when you're in a very small town or in a community where there aren't any couples counselors for miles and miles, hundreds of miles away. Sometimes the only couples counselor you can go to is your uncle. So I'll reserve judgment, but right away I'm a little concerned. The other possibility is this isn't actual professional couples counseling. We're seeing that he's a pastor. So it's possible that this is just a friendly, non-professional conversation and not actual clinical service.
Gonna side with you? Then that's really wrong.
There's a reason why I chose this uncle. Because he's straight up, he will say it like it is. If I'm at fault, he will tell me. If you're at fault, he will tell you.
He's not gonna tell me I'm at fault. I'm not at fault.
Oh, you see?
Okay, now tell me, why are we here?
Yes,
So he did ask the question, do you have a problem with the fact that I am Ronald's uncle? And, that's a little bit of addressing the risks of this kind of dual relationship. So there was a little bit of effort there, but it sounds like from Ronald's perspective, there were other people he could have chose from, and he chose his uncle. So it's just, now maybe this will work. Maybe, there's some pros to actually going to your uncle, because it sounds like the uncle knows Ronald more and might actually get on Ronald's case more readily, because if my family member came to me with their spouse, I actually probably would be harder on my family member because I know them more and I feel safer with them. So maybe there's a benefit there. Also, he knows Ronald's situation more intimately before they even walk in the door. The couples counselor cares more, presumably. So there's some pros for sure, but there are a lot of ethical cons. For example, if, like I said, say that they disclose something about their sexual life, which would be important to talk about in couples counseling. Maybe even that they are having threesomes, or just something that is socially unacceptable to some extent. And now the uncle understands that, and when family members are asking the uncle, what did you learn? He has to really try hard to keep that secret. Then when say they're at a family gathering and he sees problems going on in the relationship, he might have a lot of emotion around that of wanting to tell, you don't understand what this couple, they're terrible parents and they do all these terrible things. And, it just puts a lot of pressure on the counselor. Some of our ethical codes are also in place to protect us, because we as therapists, for me, for example, I would never treat a family member because I would want to be able to go to see family members and not have to worry about saying the wrong thing because I'm trying to hold on to all these secrets.
I really struggle. I do everything by myself with no help.
Okay.
And I feel like I'm drowning, as a woman, as a mother, everything, For example, small thing, like changing poop diapers. He won't.
I have a thing against that.
Yeah, so does everyone else in the world.
Because-
No one likes poop.
I have a thing against that. I'm a father, and yeah, I just have a thing. It's just a thing. Yeah, so I think the uncle is having a similar reaction. Let's see what he says.
If it was a boy, I'll be happy to do it. But because it's hard to explain.
I think he's just worried about, touching, like cleaning her private parts and
Okay, but, get over it. It sounds like an excuse, honestly. I mean, given what we know about Ronald, we could imagine that he is just saying that as an excuse because he doesn't want to do it.
Morning.
But he didn't do it on purpose. He thought it was just a pee. If he knew it was a poop, he'd give it to me.
Now, Ronald, listen, you must do your part. You clean that poop. If we do not give attention to these small things, that will destroy your marriage.
You clean that poop, Ronald. That's a great line. That's got to be a meme by now, right? So, yeah. All right, well, let's evaluate this intervention that the therapist is doing. I definitely would not do this. I would maybe get to this point, and I have, and I've talked about this before, that I would have heterosexual couples come in with complaints like this, and it would just drive me nuts as a man myself, hearing another man talk about how he didn't want to do chores, even though they were both working full-time jobs, and he's just like, well, I just can't do it. I don't understand. There's something about it. I can't do the laundry. I can't clean. I can't cook. I can't take care of the kids. It's just something about it. I can't do it. And I'm like, what do you just do it? Like, no one wants to do it. And I suspected it was toxic masculinity of like, well, men don't do that. And if I do that, I'm a woman and I can't be a woman and I'm going to be ridiculed. And to be a man, I have to stand tall and I have to, stand my ground and all this kind of crap. And so I would engineer a conversation usually at the beginning. I'd say like, okay, so who believes it's 50%? And neither one would say it was 50. And so the husband would say, I think I'm about 40. And the wife would say, you're about 20. And be like, okay, so let's start divvying up the chores a little bit so that it would be more 50-50. Does that make sense to the two of you? And the husband would try to reluctantly, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, because we're both working full time, 50-50 makes sense. Okay, so we start divvying it up, and then they'd go home, they'd come back, and the wife would say, he didn't do any of it. In fact, he did less this week. And I'd say, okay, well, let's try it again, because it's just logical, right? 50-50. It's just logical. So they'd go home, they wouldn't do it, and I look at the husband, I'm like, what's going on? And this resistance. And then I would say something like, what's wrong with you? Like, get over it. Get over yourself. Get over the masculinity. You're a human. Just understand that you're two humans that are the adults that have to divvy up jobs, and you have to, you can pick your jobs, but it has to be equal 50%. So, it would get frustrating to me sometimes, and it was frustratingly rigid in some men, to the point where there were some couples where they never changed, and the man never changed. I just thought, and since then, I have learned, and this, the people I'm referencing were, 20 years ago. But since then, I learned to maybe target masculinity in general early, particularly with men that I thought might struggle with this. Because, men, we're all traumatized by gender. It's not just women. We're all traumatized by the confines and the pressures of gender. And I would target that with men more readily, where I would have some philosophical conversations with men and try to hook them in by pointing out things that I think they might want to talk about. Like one of the things that men often want, to do initially might be something like express their feelings, or to be able to ask for something, to be able to ask for a hug, for example. In my experience, most men, when I say something like, well, us, I'll say something like, well, us guys, we're taught that we can't have emotions. We can't be weak. We have to be always strong. And it's just too much pressure. It's ridiculous. And we need to stop doing that to ourselves, and we need to push back on society. When I say that, I've never had a man not have that resonate with them on some level. And sometimes I even have to kind of bro down a little bit and demonstrate my male bona fides. Is that the phrase? And drop in some kind of word here and there, or mention that I was captain of the football team, or I don't know how I drop it in there. It's just like, well, for me as a man, I grew up, I was captain of the football team, was captain of the wrestling team. I was a jock, and I had all those messages given to me too. Be tough, don't cry, never ask for help. I might even mention in the 80s, they didn't even let us drink water at football practice. It would be like 100 degrees out, and we'd have 3 practices a day in the early, late summer in high school. And they wouldn't let us drink water because back then in the 80s, they thought drinking water was for wussies. And I remember when they finally let us drink water, it's just like, it just felt so good. Now they understand that dehydration is actually bad for you and your body and performance. So I'd mention this kind of thing because I would want to hook the guy in on this notion that we have been harmed. I have been harmed, and so has he been harmed. And then maybe we can build from there and eventually get to the poop.
It is destroying our marriage. I don't want to compare who's above who, but I really was a blessing in this man's life. He showed up, and he had his gambling problem, and he was a liar. So I do deserve more from him.
Interesting. I wouldn't have worded it that way if I was her, because I think that's further shaming, which I think is part of the problem with him in terms of his addictions and his compulsions is shame. And so I might say something like, I'm working really hard, and I know that he can be a good husband, something along those lines. Now, if I'm the therapist, what do I do with this? I think I would hear her and validate her kind of, but then I'd turn to him and I'd say, what do you want? This is just my instinct. This is my style. I always want to start with, who are you and what do you want? What's happening in your perspective, and what do you want? Because if I don't know what he wants, if I don't know what Ronald wants, because we don't know if Ronald wants what Tiffany wants, we don't know what he wants. Maybe he doesn't really want to be married. Maybe he just wants to be like a fun stepdad and doesn't want the same thing that Tiffany wants. So that'd be the first. Let's see what he says.
You are the head of your household. The job of the head of the household is to put your wife first, to put your family first. I think Tiffany tells him a lot. He's not a man that he needs to be, and that breaks him down.
So this is a pastoral person, and he is exhibiting, I think, that kind of vibe of authority and tradition, I suppose, head of the household kind of talk. It's definitely not my style. I would never say anything like that. I find that to be sexist, this idea that men are head of, why can't you both be the head of the household? Doesn't that make logical sense that both parents, both adults would be heads of the household? Why is he the head of the household? It's just now, people live in different cultures. They have different ideas. So maybe it works for them. It doesn't work for me. Now, if I had a client that talked that way, I might kind of entertain it, but not entirely. I wouldn't oppose it by any means. But anyway, so, that's his message. I don't think it's going to work on Ronald. I think Ronald's just going to go, I reject you. And just like I reject Tiffany, I don't think this is going to work.
My advice to Tiffany is to boost Ronald's ego. Men need their ego to be boosted by their wives. Once you've boosted their ego, they want to do more.
Okay, I'm not exactly, this is still, in the sexist realm that she needs to please him more and like boost his ego like he's a child. He needs to boost his own ego. So, but if I give her the benefit of the doubt, there's nothing wrong with saying, you know what, you need to appreciate each other more. You need to show appreciation. You need to love each other more, and maybe that will help the bond and help motivate both people. Who knows? But I don't know. Maybe I'm giving him too much credit, because all he said so far is you have to be the man of the house, and you need to put her first. You need to put family first, and she needs to feed your ego. Yeah, that's counseling.
Then you have a problem.
She doesn't understand the emotional, let's call it baggage that I have. The stuff I go through, being alone in South Africa, my family is that side. Seeing my kids grow up over a phone. I never speak about my emotions. I never tell her I'm sad, I'm down, I'm whatever.
Okay. Actually, this counseling seems to be working. He's getting this. This is good, actually. I think it's a beginning of maybe 50 to 100 sessions worth of material, but this is a start.
Keeping against that?
I never.
Well, she disagree with you.
When we get into an argument, he hangs up and that's it. If I get off the phone, it's not like you'll call me 10 minutes later, 20 minutes later, 40 minutes later, because he is too big and too strong to call me back and say, let's sort it out.
All right, well, so this is a start, but I actually kind of like the intervention. I thought what was going to happen is that she was going to say, no, he doesn't use it, and that we were going to find out that she could be vulnerable and it actually wouldn't get used against her. But she's saying it is used against her. So we have this precedent that being vulnerable can be used against you, which, but anyway, this is actually, they're having a good conversation. Again, this is the beginning of 100 sessions. They're not going to fix this problem right now, for sure.
I'm going to ask both of you to do things. Okay? The first thing is stop criticizing each other. Okay? And take your anger and put it aside. And Ronald, it's not difficult. It's very easy. Be supportive.
Not bad advice. You're essentially strong-arming a client to do something that I don't think is going to happen. It's not bad advice. It's just like, your criticism is actually probably going to hurt each other. That's not what he's saying. What he's saying is don't criticize each other. Yeah, great. But I don't think many clients just, it's just like, don't be depressed.
Stop it. Can you work on that?
I want to say I feel a little bit better, but then again, I feel, I didn't even get 1% in of my point of view or what's bothering me.
Okay, and that's normal. Almost all the time in the beginning phase, which could last 1 to 35 sessions, clients in couples therapy will often feel like they were ganged up on. Both of them will feel like they're ganged up on, or one will feel ganged up on, the other one will feel like they got a fair shake. There's just a lot of anxiety when you go into couples therapy, and you have this expectation or hope or fantasy that the therapist is going to be like, oh my goodness, you are so balanced and healthy, but your spouse is really a piece of work. You have this fantasy because that's your point of view, your bias. And when that doesn't happen, you feel like you're disappointed, you're ganged up on, you're not heard. Depending on your differentiation level. And given Ronald's differentiation level, even though I would have said the session was, maybe a little bit more against Ronald, but his advice was to the two of them, stop criticizing. And, I think he was balanced, seemingly, at least the clips they showed us, but Ronald felt like it was ganging up on him.
Tiffany surely feels better by making me sound like an ass again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Ronald.
Waardeer het. Alles van die beste.
Laat het goed gaan.
It's a bit of a letdown.
Yeah, so I suspect they'll never go back to couples therapy ever again. And this is just another venue for them to express their dysfunction, and nothing will change. That's just, can you tell I've been disappointed? I mean, Colt and Larissa went to one session of couples therapy. Who else went to therapy? Someone else this season, right? With the man up guy. What couple was that? Who was that? I forget, but it's always just one session.
Well, you didn't think that was the case?
Love, you also have faults,
We didn't have to talk about my faults because that's not the issue.
Will you be able to do this criticism thing?
Can you tell me how I criticize you?
I don't do enough.
That's not criticizing you. That's a true statement.
Yeah, so I think Ronald makes a fair point. I do think Ronald has a lot of growing up to do, but this is a fair point that she does criticize him. Now, you could argue that she is criticizing it or pointing things out of justification or frustration. That makes sense. I'm trying to remember all the interactions I've observed. I think Tiffany can be a little have a tone with it. You know, there's one thing to request something like, hey, you know, I'd really like it if this, but her tone can often be pretty critical and motherly, which probably hurts him, and he's communicating that right now. On the other hand, if you're just constantly bumping up against the same walls over and over again, as Tiffany I think does, then sometimes you're going to get frustrated. But at any rate, Tiffany, if she wants to make this work, which I don't know if she does, in this instance, she should say, okay, yeah, maybe I shouldn't criticize you as much. And then resolve that issue. And then she could say, so I will do that for you. Can you do something for me? You know, that kind of building of that trust. Instead, she just rigidly says, no, I don't criticize you. I am just stating how it is. That's, I don't think it's going to be a very helpful stance.
I cannot be insulted.
I won't insult you. I'm not even going to
Exactly.
criticize.
So get in the car and walk away from the conversation because you don't know how to handle what I'm telling you.
I don't need to handle this.
Exactly.
You don't make sense. Just go.
No.
Go.
I'm not getting in this car because I deserve an apology. I'm not going to be spoke to like that. I'm not dealing with it, Ronald, for real.
Okay.
So it seems that the therapy session gave both of them license to be meaner to each other. Now, it's not uncommon after, especially in the beginning phase of couples therapy, to have a lot of things drudged up and then for the couple to have a lot of tension right after the session. So that happens sometimes. And when I sense that and predict that, I will have a conversation with clients at the end of the couple session and say, so I'm feeling a lot of tension right now, and there's a possibility that when you get in the car to drive home, you're going to want to lay into each other, and I want to have you have some caution around that. If you think you can be constructive on the way home, then have a conversation. But if you can't, then you might want to give it a day before you talk so that you can calm down. You know, we've dredged a lot of things up. And I also sometimes with couples that have a lot of conflict is I will ask them if it would be helpful if they just waited until our session, you know, week to week. Because some couples are so volatile and they have so much relational traumas, as I think this couple actually does, that they almost need a couples therapist to be there in order to help them talk to each other. And then hopefully over time, they can generalize that to the outside world. But in the beginning, sometimes, you know, there are some people who have never had a functional communication, never had a functional conversation about emotions or about a relationship. Never. They've never seen it. They've never heard of it. They have no idea what it looks like. And so to expect them to come into one session or even 5 sessions and to walk out the door and be able to do it on their own is actually a really high expectation, I have found.
And tell me I need a vacation from the kids that I decided to do everything by myself. That's on you. I really don't need to put
on yourself. Your mom's always there by you. You're not alone.
Do you see? So because my mom helps me out sometimes.
Doing something alone when your family is always there helping you.
So they've crossed that threshold where they are not being constructive at all. They haven't been since they walked out of the session. You know, for Ronald, I think he wants to be treated nicer. And for Tiffany, she wants him to be less of a toxic man and more of a positive man and actually help out. And, well, not just help out, but be a dad and be a participant and try to be more responsible. And also, really, I think Ronald needs to go to a lot of recovery. We saw him at that retreat where he was recovering from gambling addiction, but I would suspect that he needs ongoing meetings, ongoing therapy. Something is going on with him that is plaguing him, that resulted in the gambling addiction and the other kinds of things that we're seeing. That's my take, is that he needs a lot of individual therapy, a lot of recovery, a lot of 12-step meetings, a lot of, you know, support group meetings to talk about his feelings, to talk about the cycle of addiction, to talk about the cycle of compulsion. and the cycle of shame, frankly. They need couples therapy a lot as well to learn how to talk to each other. And Tiffany would benefit from that too. And for Tiffany to say that she is zero responsible for the relationship problems is problematic, and sort of makes the point for Ronald that she is rigid and stubborn. So I could see it working, but there doesn't seem to be a lot of hope, honestly, for this relationship. But we'll continue watching. All right, well, that is it for that episode. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.